Hello and welcome to Inside CLA by Communityled Alliance. I'm your host, Jade Warne, copywriter here at CLA. In this series, we'll be interviewing people at the top leadership level at CLA and our umbrella company, the Alliance, but through the lens of community-led growth. Communityled Alliance is one of 14 communities under the Alliance umbrella. The Alliance itself is a community-led media platform, so it's no surprise that community-led growth is at the heart of everything we do. When it comes to CLG strategy, we know our stuff, but we also know it's a unique way to set up a company. That's why we wanted to open the doors to what it really means to run a community-led media platform, from the people who are actually doing it. Our goal? To give you an honest insight into why we're so passionate about community-led growth, to explore the whys, hows, do's and don'ts of CLG strategy, and to deepen your understanding of how different senior roles look in a community-led organisation. Today's guest is Bryony Pearce, Chief Marketing Officer of CLA and the Alliance. Of course, she's the one in charge of all of our marketing activities. But how does this role manifest in a community-led organisation? And just how much impact can engaged communities have on traditional marketing strategies? She's been with the Alliance throughout the forging of numerous communities, so I've no doubt I'm going to learn a lot in this episode. Let's get into it. Hi Bryony, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for coming on. Please introduce yourself to our listeners.
Hi Jade, first of all, thanks so much for having me. Appreciate you organising this and really excited to be here. My name's Bryony and I'm the CMO here at the Alliance.
Brilliant. And what does it look like day to day for you as a CMO?
Yeah, busy and no day is ever the same. No hour, I think, is ever the same. Lots going on. I guess for a bit of context as well, in my role as CMO here at the Alliance, as well as obviously overseeing the marketing department, which kind of consists of the straight up kind of marketing roles. We've also got design and UX in there and the content team. Also oversee the customer success team and the course team as well. So three very different departments there. So my time, I try to split as best I can across those three different business areas. At the moment, kind of being end of November, very thick into plan season for next year. So looking at kind of budgets, how that then transcends into KPIs, how that then transcends into strategies, and how that then transcends into recruitment in terms of how we deliver on that. So that's very high in my mind at the moment and where a lot of my time is being spent. I guess outside of this kind of hardcore planning season that we're in right now, obviously there's a lot of that going on year round, especially on kind of the KPI and the numbers and the data side. That's something that's obviously very much a day-to-day job. I think for me as well, maybe a little bit more of that in the sense of I'm trying to keep on top of, in the marketing department, revenue for courses, revenue for memberships, leads for kind of partner products.
Sorry, number heavy.
Yeah, customer success, we've got churn, we've got a load of metrics in there. And on the course side, it's things like actual course delivery, course feedback and all that kind of stuff. So there's a very big kind of day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month piece in making sure that I'm across that for every single community that we've got, so we can kind of keep on top of those peaks and troughs. So yeah, that's very, very big for me day to day. Also, kind of mentioned at the moment in kind of planning and strategy season. Obviously, once we've built those strategies, it's not then off my plate. I'm also working very closely with the teams to make sure that we're executing on time and executing well, and that there's no hiccups or kind of if there's any opportunities, what else we need to do there. I'm still very involved in those conversations. Also, I guess as many CMOs, people management, got quite a few people reporting into me at the moment. So everything from one-to-ones to reviews to just being that kind of support mechanism for anyone that's reporting into me. And that obviously eats into a fair bit of time as well. And I think as well, just because of the size of the company at the moment, the amount that we have to deliver and the little resource that we've got at the moment, just because of recruitment, we've got lots of recruitment going on at the moment, haven't necessarily filled all of the roles that we need to yet. So still very in the thick of a lot of the marketing campaigns and actually kind of rolling my sleeves up, building the emails, getting the emails out, building social posts. That's hopefully more of a temporary stopgap at the moment until we've got those recruitment in place. But just due to the size of the team and the growth at the moment, still very heavily involved in that. And I guess final one, meetings. Obviously meetings, as I mentioned, with direct reports, but we've got obviously a lot of communities on the go, still involved in some of those community meetings. More so some of our really new communities in the sense of they obviously need the most kind of support and direction and guidance to get them to that next stage and to help them mature. So I do try and attend as many of those as I can to, as I say, kind of guide some of those. So I'd say a healthy blend between data, meetings, campaigns, people management, constant juggling act between them all.
That's a lot to have on your plate.
Yeah.
So walk us through your professional background and how that led to your role at the Alliance.
Yeah, so my background is traditionally in content. I studied journalism at university. Straight out of university, I went into copywriting roles, and that was where my first 2 to 3 in-house roles were. After I'd been in-house for a little while copywriting, I then went freelance for around about a year, I think, and did a bit of travelling on the side as well. And that's what led me to the Alliance. It was Josie, our now CMO, that reached out to me on LinkedIn. It started just by writing kind of a few blog posts a month. That then increased to kind of a day a month. That then increased to 2 days a month, then to a 3-month contract, and then to full-time employment. But yeah, all very heavy on the content side, which I think is definitely lended itself well to what I'm doing now. And we'll probably touch on this later, but we're very much a content-led company. And when we're growing our communities, that's the first hire we'll make, and that's what we'll prioritise, and that's why we start to grow those communities. So it was a bit of an unintentional path, I guess, but one that's aligned itself really nicely.
That's great to hear. It's nice and organic, the way that you come into the company.
Yeah.
So how does your role as a CMO differ here to that of a traditional company?
Yeah, I guess I've not been a CMO in a previous company, so I couldn't kind of compare it to anything, but I've obviously worked in marketing departments in previous companies before. I think there are a couple of key differences, specifically to the Alliance as well, being an umbrella company, in the sense of there's just so much going on. With 14 communities, lots of different revenue streams within those communities, but also the community piece being a gigantic piece that sits over all those revenue streams. It's a lot to get your head around, and I know certainly for new starters, when they come to this company, I think when you start any company, there's a big onboarding process, and you end up frazzled in those first kind of few days and week. I feel that's sometimes heightened at the Alliance because it's not just 1 or 2 products, it's 5, 6, 7 products across 14 communities, all at different stages.
It's a lot to learn, but it's probably the most organised onboarding experience I've ever had. It's just a lot.
That's great that the onboarding's nice and organised though. But yeah, I think in terms of, and as a result of all that going on, I guess the way in which the company is structured will be a lot different to other organisations. And I think some of the roles that we have as well are quite maybe niche roles in the sense of nothing is pigeonholed in this company. There's some roles, like some job titles that we all have. It's not necessarily a job title, but it's a bespoke kind of role that we need.
It's very unique to the Alliance.
Yeah, exactly. To kind of connect the dots between some of these departments and connect maybe traditional roles to the community side of things. And I think that's very different. And again, like in those onboarding processes and kind of getting to grips, like that is a big piece that takes some people a bit of getting used to, because it's just not like any kind of setup that they've seen before. And then in terms of the actual kind of marketing that we do in the kind of campaigns, I wouldn't say it's hugely different to a traditional company in the sense of we're community first. Most companies are customer first. I guess it's kind of alternating between customer and community. Yeah. But I think one really big advantage we have, not even just limited to the marketing team, but the company, because we do have these communities, obviously within the Alliance, some are at different stages than others. But for our mature communities that are really engaged, it is such a great source of intel to tap into. And obviously as marketers, it's really important to be close to the voice of your customer.
Definitely.
For us, it's so easy to be close to the voice of our community because we can see them talking and interacting day in, day out. We know what the problems are, we know what the challenges are, we know what the trending topics are, we know how they kind of communicate with each other. So that then makes it really easy for us to get into the skin of that and also just translate that into our like marketing, into our content. And when we do go into these kind of planning seasons, all of that is very front of mind and stuff that we do, like I say, translate into those plans.
Brilliant. And so off the back of that, how would you define community-led growth?
Yeah, it's a really, it's a really interesting question. I think there are a few ways to look at it, because for me, in terms of community-led growth, I guess like there's obviously one big piece of it is actually building that community and having an active and engaged community. But I think outside of the community, as I kind of mentioned, it's community-led, customer-led. It's ultimately, it's feeding into the voice of what that community or customer base wants and making sure that's front of mind. and what you are doing is very much in line with what they want, what they're asking for, and what they need. So I think for me, in many ways, community-led and customer-led are kind of one of the same. I think for companies who don't have a community, it's obviously customer-led. For us, it's community-led. And in terms of how that impacts our marketing, probably touched on that a little earlier, but it's just making sure that that voice is consistently fed into everything that we do, and that we don't waste that resource. It's such a valuable resource for us to have. As I mentioned, there's not a single department in the company that doesn't benefit from that.
Definitely.
If we're building events, what topics are people speaking about? What are they struggling with? Let's get some presentations on the agenda. When we're building our content plans, what's coming up? What's not been covered? What are people asking to be covered? Let's create a blog for that, or a podcast for that, or a report for that. Same for kind of sales as well. If they're having conversations with these people, like, what do they want to know about? What do they like? Like, how can we speak to these people in a way that will kind of relate? So every single department that we have in the company really benefits from that. And that's quite unique, I think, because as I mentioned, kind of with the customer-led side, I think certainly from my experience in companies that I've been in previously, a lot of people speak about kind of being customer focused and wanting to be close to the voice of the customer. How often that actually happens and how easily that happens realistically is certainly not as accessible as it is in a community-led company, in the sense of, as a marketer, you're not going to be on the phone every day talking to your customers. You're also not frontline like customer support or customer success to actually interact with them. What you end up getting is kind of snippets of information, whether that's bi-weekly or monthly or even quarterly. But that's not even done, and that wasn't done in companies that I'd been previously. But as mentioned, I'll not maybe labour the point, but we have got that. Like, at any point, any day, we can go to that Slack community and we've got that information, like self-serve.
Brilliant. I know you've had a lot of time starting communities, obviously, throughout your time at the Alliance and starting CLA. How do you know when there's space for a community to be built?
Yeah, really good question. I guess when I came in, so Product Marketing Alliance, Product-Led Alliance and Sales Enablement Collective, they'd already been established. And I think product marketing, there was just a big gap in the market. And that was really evident, I think, just with how quickly that community grew. I think it surpassed anyone's expectations in terms of kind of Slack community growth, but outside of that as well, from kind of an education and event perspective, really flew off the shelves. Since then, I guess the communities that I've been more involved with, as I kind of mentioned in the previous question, it's listening to these Slack conversations. And for example, the customer success community, we could see in our product marketing community, a lot of people talking about customer success. I'd been on a few conversations with product marketers. They were talking about customer success, and like, there's just nowhere to go at the moment. So kind of had a little look into that, and I was like, yeah, actually there isn't anywhere for people in customer success to go. Like, we know it's an emerging role. We can see on platforms like LinkedIn how many people are in that profession. So for instances like that, we tend to gauge it based on what we're hearing in the market, what we can see is available to those people, and what the opportunity is in terms of how many people we know are in those kind of roles, and we use that as a bit of a gauge. We also kind of test that, I guess, before we look to roll it out, in the sense of before we launched the customer success community, we did actually run a couple of events through another community of ours, Future of SaaS, just to see, like, if we put something out there, would it stick?
Yeah.
And it did. We did the first customer success event. We had thousands of people chomping at the bit, and lots of really great feedback from people. Like, this is the first time I've had something like this. Like, it's so great to have people to speak to. And that kind of solidified the opportunity.
That must be a great feeling as well, to just know that you're sort of onto something. You're like, actually, people really do need this space, and we're about to create it.
Absolutely. And that's what we do with a lot of our communities, really. If we think there's something there, and a lot of it is conversation based, people that we're speaking to, whether it's community members, people just outside of the community, it might be vendors, it could be customers, a whole range of people. We'll kind of validate any assumptions that way. And then we'll never go straight in and just create a community with absolutely no idea whether the demand is there. But we've obviously got a portfolio of communities, and since my day one, there's always been 3 or 4 there. So we do tend to test them out on an existing community, and events are a huge way, huge part of how we do that, and then once we run a couple of events, and so we validated it, we'll then put the time and the resource and the money into creating a fully fledged community for that.
Brilliant. What are some of the misconceptions you think you've had about CLG, or some of the questions people have asked?
Yeah, in terms of misconceptions, I think one, and maybe kind of talks to the point that I mentioned a little earlier in terms of maybe how people kind of segregate it from customer-led, in that I think for some people it might seem like a bit of a foreign strategy or a foreign approach, but I think ultimately if you're putting your market at the heart of everything that you're doing in one way or another, whether or not you have a Slack or a Circle community or whatever it might be, you are going in with a bit of a customer-led approach, which, as I said, to me is a little bit akin to a community-led approach. Not necessarily misconceptions, but I guess maybe as a result of that, I think what maybe puts some people off taking that community-led approach is thinking it's maybe more work than it potentially is. But also, I guess one of the big off-putting pieces is actually creating the community. That is, it's not an easy task, and you don't decide to create a community one day and the next week you've got this really thriving community that you can tap into and make use of throughout your company. It takes months of really hard work, manual work and dedication to make sure that you're ultimately getting the people into that community, that you're making that community a really valuable place for people to want to stay, that you're nurturing and you're instigating those conversations. If you filled like a really rife gap, like maybe it takes you a few months to get to that point, but it can take 6, 7, 8, 9 months to get to a point where you've got this really active community of people that are really self-sufficient and at the point where you don't necessarily need to instigate all those conversations yourself. And I think that can be a big drawback for some people, not necessarily wanting to put in that groundwork. But I think once you put in that groundwork, the benefits are so worth it. But I think, not sure if it's a misconception as such, but I think that's maybe a little bit of a barrier. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and it's understandable. I mean, after what you said earlier about just how much that can really tap into every part of a company and how much as a marketer, you can start to really get those customer insights and really feed that back into the way that you're campaigning and doing what you do. Yeah, it's just invaluable.
Yeah, 100%.
Can you outline some of the community engagement strategies that have worked for you or some wins in your time here?
Yeah, definitely. So I guess as I mentioned a little earlier, content has historically and will continue to be a huge part of that engagement piece. For a little bit of context for Product Marketing Alliance, for example, so our kind of first community, we didn't actually offer paid for products for a good 6 months, I'd say, after Product Marketing Alliance launched. It was just blogs and reports and podcasts and white papers and webinars, all free, all adding value, free value, to make sure that when we did have those paid for offerings, that people had that kind of trust and kind of respect for us, and they knew that they could get value out the free content that we would produce, that they have faith that they can get value out the paid for products. And then ultimately as well, without that content, we've not got a magnet to pull people into the Slack community. And if we've got no content, like what can we share with people in that Slack community, and how can we get them to engage, and how do we keep them in there and keep them wanting to come back from there? Because ultimately these communities are great marketing platforms for us and content platforms to share all this, like whether it is paid for products or whether it is free content. That is where we want to be sharing that, and that's how we want to make sure that we can get in front of people's eyes. So content has, and as I say, always will be a really key part for us when it comes to community engagement. I think outside of that, not necessarily kind of groundbreaking or revolutionary things, but I think it's the small things that really make a difference when it comes to community. It's obviously all about putting the community first and building, whether it's courses or content or events, building it based on what they want. So little things, like when we're, again, if I kind of go back to PMA, but we obviously do a lot of courses on this community. When we are building our course plans for next year, we'll put something out in there, like what courses haven't we got that you want? Like what do you want to see from us? And before we brought our courses live and online, we weren't sure of the best delivery method. Like, would it be 1 day, 2 half days, like 4 few-hour sessions? Like there are so many ways you could slice and dice it. We just put it out there, like we're thinking about doing this, so we're getting them involved in like the future projects and letting them know what we're working on. but we're doing this for you. Like, how do you want to do it? Like, what options do you want
to make sure they're on the same page as you, because they're the ones who are going to be benefiting from what you're putting out.
Exactly. And like, I think ultimately, like with communities, like they want to be in the loop and they want to know what you're working on. They don't want to just be told at the end, like, okay, like we've done this, go buy it or go download it, go read it. They want to be part of that process. And I think a big part of building those relationships with the community is having those open conversations and making it a two-way dialogue.
Definitely.
So we're really intentional about doing that with our courses and with our content as well, because again, there are lots of ways we can build our content strategies. SEO is a big part of it, but you're not always going to get keywords for specific challenges that people in specific professions are facing. So the other way we can find that is by asking them and building on the back of that. So yeah, as I say, like, doesn't feel too groundbreaking, but I think it's about that dialogue. I think it's about being transparent with what you're doing, and it's not just dictating what you're doing. It's making sure that you're grabbing their insights on a regular basis and feeding them into the outcomes.
Yeah, I think it's important to know as well, like every community is free to join, always will be. And with the courses as well, the course team makes a real effort to reach out to the communities and make sure that they're giving their input as well, and they're even helping build those courses. So it's really a collaborative effort right through to the end, and that's obviously a major part of the engagement, because people will want to engage with something that they've had a real part in forming as well.
100%. As you say, like in our courses, when we're interviewing kind of experts for that, they're experts from our community, and when we're running events, they are experts from our community, and even for like meetups and things like that, that's our community hosting that. So they're so involved and so instrumental to what we do. But the only way people kind of advocate for you and want to do that for you is if you give them something back. And that kind of maybe like translates to the content piece we spoke about, is giving them something and the networking that they get in the Slack community. Like, it's all just a never ending kind of funnel of giving and taking and giving and taking and giving and taking.
Definitely. I mean, it's just always value first, and making sure that they're given the value that they really are going to appreciate. Have you always been CMO? I mean, I know you talked about it earlier, but how has that role sort of changed for you since you've been here at the Alliance?
Yeah, I think it's one of those where it happens so gradually yet so quickly. I can't even pinpoint a lot of the changes. I just woke up one day and I was here. But yeah, I started very much in a copywriting role, as I mentioned, with PMA for the first like good 6 months. All we were doing is producing reports and podcasts and blogs, and that was me. I was the only hire really at that time, and I was producing all of that. And that was also like really instrumental for me in terms of how embedded I then became in the community, because I was conducting all these interviews on podcasts. I was meeting so much with the community, really understanding them as individuals, but also helping me understand the role and everything it entails. And that was so key, I think, for my understanding, of the company as a whole. After a few months, we're kind of being a sole contributor for PMA. We then started growing the content team, and we brought copywriters on board for some of our other communities. And then, growing the content team has been a constant evolution. Started with just me 3 years ago. We're now at a team of 19, I think. So that's grown an awful lot in the last few years. In the process of that happening, I guess the first department I took on was the course team. So again, way back then, being a one-man band, course team started with just me, and that was me building Product Marketing Core, which is our flagship course, and then starting to establish that course team. Again, 2 years ago, that was just me. We're now at a team of, I think, 9 or 10 for the course team. So that's been gradually building in the background. And then not too long after that, start building out the customer success function. Obviously, as we started rolling out actual paid for products in the community, we need to make sure we had someone to kind of support that and make sure we had great onboarding experiences. So kind of took that team on maybe 18 months or so after I joined. And then it was only, I guess now 11 months ago, so very start of 2022, that I then kind of took on my current role and had a more active role in marketing. Prior to that, I think like the marketing of PMA, I'd always been very hands-on with, but less so for the other communities, but now ultimately responsible for marketing of all the products, all the channels across all the communities. So yeah, I've been through quite a few roles since I've been here and taken on quite a few new departments, but I've loved every step of it.
That's good to hear. And finally, what would your top advice be for people starting a community?
Yeah, I guess be patient. It is not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen in a couple of months. It's going to be a long process. And it can be disheartening at first when you've got a community, you're trying to drive that engagement, it can feel like you're speaking into a void. And I think that's probably the critical point, that most people just think, this is a waste of time, I'm not going to get anything out of this. But if you don't persevere for those first few months of going through that, like, you're never going to get to the point where you get a self-sufficient community. So be patient, I think would be the big one. The second one was just deliver value. Not all companies have the focus on content that we do. As mentioned, I've been in copywriting roles in previous companies. They didn't have a content mindset, and it's one of those roles. Yeah, and you feel like you have to constantly justify your value, because content isn't the type of role like with traditional marketing roles. Like, we brought in X many $1,000s this month. That's not always the point of content. We obviously drive organic revenue, but there is a lot more to it than that revenue driving role. So that can be a hard part. Like, if you're in a company that doesn't have that content focus and you're not able to put the time and the resource into building that great top of funnel content that delivers value to your community, that brings your community into the process. Because this is another way in which, like, we bring our community in. Like, for our blogs, like, we want to get their input. We want them to produce blogs on our site. Like, we want a lot of contributor content, and we don't just want it to be us speaking to them. We want it definitely to be a joint approach. So I guess second piece of advice, if you're not sold on content or you don't believe in the value of content, start believing, because it's essential. And as I mentioned, copywriter, it's the first hire we will ever make when we create a new community, and we will never launch a new community without having a really rich bank of content for people to get stuck into first. I guess third bit of advice, as I say, just don't forget about your community as it's growing. Don't make plans in isolation. Make the most of that really valuable resource that you've got, and make sure that you're bringing it into it. You're using them as a sounding board and making sure that you're heading in the right direction, and just giving them that voice that they want and that you need.
Brilliant. Well, that's a lovely way to finish it. Thank you so much for being a guest. I feel like I've learned a lot, and thank you so much.
Great. Thanks for having me, Jade.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Inside CLA. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you're hungry for more insights, make sure you head to our website, www.communityledgrowth.com, where you can find a wide variety of digital content. To join in the conversation, check out our growing Slack community of CLG professionals. You can find the link on our website, or if you're watching this on YouTube, in the description box below. See you in the next episode.